Now it gives me great pleasure to introduce our third speaker of the evening, Professor Avi Schroeder, an acclaimed researcher and serial entrepreneur who heads the Technion Israel Institute of Technology's Targeted Drug Delivery and Personalized Medicine Group. Since completing his graduate studies in chemical engineering at Ben Gurion in Hebrew U and his postdoctoral studies at MIT, Prof. Schroeder has always looked for innovations that you can invent in a lab and that change people's lives. He's a tenured chemical engineering professor at the Technion with a research interest in the interface of medicine with nanotechnology. His research aims at improving patients' quality of life and bettering treatment by developing innovative medical technologies. Prof. Schroeder is the author of numerous scientific papers in the field of nanotechnology and medicine. In addition, he is inventor of no less than 14 patents and recipient of 20 national and international innovation awards. He's also a scientific entrepreneur, forming 5 successful Technion startup companies. Without further ado, I hand over to Avi for his talk.
Thank you very much, Ronel, and I really am very excited being here. Thank you to Nogafem, Michal, the Israel Innovation Authority, and all my colleague speakers, really for highlighting this important topic, but most importantly, to all the people that are with us on the line and actually understand how much medicine has to go and achieve in this gender and sex specific area, and how much more we have to go. So we know we're in the beginning, and there's so much work to do. So thank you for that support. The image you have in front of you is from the city of Haifa, the top image. The other images are from Israel. I know we have people from all around the world here. And I encourage everyone to come and visit us here at the Technion, and of course see the country. So when I entered the area of nanotechnology in medicine, we were looking at how to develop new systems that can actually carry a medicine inside the body and deliver it exactly to where it's needed, to the disease site specifically, and by that reduce side effects and improve efficacy of therapeutic treatment. And I was amazed as an undergraduate student to come across this paper, which was a pioneering paper in the field that actually showed 3 different patients here, 1 female and 2 males, and nanoparticles that were injected intravenously to each one of these patients. And the nanoparticles, even though the patients actually had different types of cancer, tumors, at the top, a tumor at the base of the tongue, a patient with breast cancer, this is her primary tumor, and metastasis in the local lymph node, and a patient with lung cancer and metastasis in the spine. And while these cancers are different from one another, the nanoparticles actually from the circulation, from the blood circulation, were able to target the disease site, to actually detect where the tumor is and to deliver the medicine locally. And that, for me, opened my eyes. And actually, since then, I've been working in the area of nanotechnology and medicine. But it's important for me to say that in this field today, we're extremely, extremely diverse. And even though we've been diverse for so many years in the field of nanotechnology and medicine, we have not been addressing the questions of gender in nanomedicine. And this came to us totally through serendipity, an experiment that went wrong and actually brought us deep into this field and has opened to our eyes to how important the connecting nanomedicines and nanotechnology is, also to the field of gender. And just to make bring the landscape to everyone, nanotechnology is not distant to the clinic. There are already more than 80 nanomedicines that are being used day in and day out. The first one was invented in the Hebrew University. It's a 100 nanometer particle that contains the anti-cancer agent doxorubicin inside of it, and it's used for treating primarily female patients with breast and ovarian cancer. So these nanoparticles are injected into the vein and they accumulate in the tumor and metastasis and actually improve the therapeutic outcome in these patients. But since then, the approval of this first nanotechnology medicine, nanotechnology has gone far, and many diseases are being treated using nanotechnology with combinations of medicine inside these nanoparticles, or nanoparticles that are inhaled for treating COVID, or even recently, I think something that we all are extremely aware of, the new vaccines, both of Moderna and Pfizer, are actually nanotechnology-based based vaccines. These are 100 nanometer particles, about 1/1000th the width of a hair on our head, each one of these particles drawn here. And these nanoparticles carry inside them that messenger RNA that we all have been hearing about so much in the news. They carry them into the cell. The nanotechnology then falls apart, the nanoparticle falls apart, and allows the mRNA to be encoded into proteins which induce that immune response that new vaccines have. So nanotechnology has really gotten very broad for treating different diseases in the clinic day in and day out. And again, just to exemplify how small nanotechnology is, so trying to imagine 1/1000th of a width of a hair is hard. I think it's even harder to look at this silicon chip that was taken. This image was taken here at the Technion. On this 1 millimeter silicon chip, the entire Bible was actually engraved in nanotechnology letters. So you can really get a lot of information in a very, very small area. When you go small, you can improve the targeting to different tissues, and you can also improve the therapeutic outcome using nanotechnology. And in my group, I had two graduate students, Maria Polai and Asaf Zinger, that were working on using nanotechnology to treat pancreatic cancer, to improve the outcome of this fatal illness and push the envelope one step further. And they were down in the MRI in the Rambam Medical Center, and they were taking images of male mouse. And we thought to ourselves, well, not only men have pancreatic cancer, let's also take an image of a female mouse during the disease. And then something really strange happened. And they came back with this image, and this was about 8 p.m. in the evening when you want to close up and go home. And they showed me, they said, Avi, listen, we see this very strange biodistribution in the mouse. And I immediately told them, guys, this is the bladder. Come on, it's the end of the day. Let's go home. And they said, no, Avi, this is not the bladder. And they were right, like many times students are. This is not the bladder. Actually, what we saw is accumulation of nanoparticles in the reproductive tract of the mice. And the reason this happened, actually, is that the mouse menstrual cycle is induced by the presence of a male in close vicinity. That's how it is in mice. And once the menstrual cycle actually was activated, the nanoparticles that were injected intravenously to the vein of the mice, instead of going to the pancreatic tumor, were distorted from the pancreatic tumor and went directly to the reproductive tract. We said that's extremely, extremely interesting, and Maria has actually dedicated her entire PhD to studying this phenomenon. So just one word about the biology. The reproductive tract in mice is slightly different than in humans, and it contains 2 uteruses and the ovaries that are actually connected to them. And for us, what it did, it opened, actually this observation opened the question that I think the FDA has been looking at since 1993, rather recent, as how medicines actually affect men and women differently. And what we wanted to come and ask is, are women and men actually different when we look at nanomedicines, nanotechnologies? We have so many of them on the shelf being used day in and day out in the clinic. Maybe also men and women respond differently to nanotechnology medicines. And that's what we went on to study. And more specifically, the first question we asked, which I will focus on in the next 2 or 3 minutes, is, do nanoparticles actually distribute differently during the menstrual cycle? Can the menstrual cycle actually impact the biodistribution, meaning where the nanoparticles go inside the body during the menstrual cycle? And we all know that the ovaries, which support the future of humanity, every month they go through a menstrual cycle, or in mice, they also have a menstrual cycle that's induced. And during the cycle itself, there's actually an increase in blood flow towards the ovaries in order to support the future of life and fertility. And through small holes in the blood vessels that actually occurs during that peak of fertility, the nanoparticles can extravasate out of the circulation and enter into the ovaries, which can either be positive or negative, depending what we want to treat. More specifically, when we tested the biodistribution of nanoparticles into the ovaries and uterus throughout the menstrual cycle, we saw that during the menstrual cycle itself, we see a peak of double the number of nanoparticles, or even higher than that, that will reach the ovaries and the uterus. And this, of course, can have huge implications to human health. When we looked closely under the microscope, I just love this image. It's so beautiful. This is an ovary. This is a microscopy image, a histology of the ovary. And these are the follicles, the egg follicles. And you can notice the nanoparticles, actually these pink dots around each one of the follicles, standing on the doorset of the follicles and actually waiting there with their medicine inside. And when we looked at the impact, we actually looked at different diseases, how we could treat and how this may impact also fertility of the mice, which is so important when we think of the translation of nanotechnology to the clinic. And the first case we looked at is breast cancer. We wanted to ask ourselves, how does the menstrual cycle actually impact the biodistribution of nanoparticles containing a medicine inside them during in mice that actually bear a breast cancer tumor? And in this case, we actually saw that when a nanomedicine is actually administered during the peak of the menstrual cycle, instead of the medicine going to the tumor, it actually is distorted towards the reproductive tract. And I'll discuss that distortion in 1 second more. So if we want more medicine to reach the tumor, we probably don't want to administer it at the peak of the menstrual cycle, but maybe when the menstrual cycle is at its end or between menstrual cycles, because then we get a better therapeutic outcome. And when we, and that of course deducted the conclusion, the first conclusion we had is that the menstrual cycle should be considered when we come to develop nanomedicines. Another case we looked at is ovarian cancer itself. In ovarian cancer, we know that many times ovarian cancer is detected very late, at a very late stage, which makes it harder to treat. And in these cases, we actually want maximum of the medicine going to the tumor inside the ovaries rather than just distributing throughout the body. And what we did is when mice had a peak of their ovulation, this is relevant to younger patients that have ovarian cancer. When the mice had a peak of ovulation, we actually administered the nanomedicine and were able to improve the therapeutic outcome of the mice that had ovarian cancer. Contrarily, when we let the nanoparticles distribute in a normal manner without accounting for the ovarian for the menstrual cycle, we actually had poorer performance of the nanomedicines in the mice. So that was, again, another assurance that the menstrual cycle has to be accounted for when we use nanotechnology medicines. And the last question we asked actually regards to the mice that had the breast cancer. It was an orthotopic tumor, meaning that it was located in the mammary fat pad. And we asked ourselves, regarding the biodistribution of the nanoparticles to the ovaries, can this impact the fertility of the mice, the long-term fertility of the mice? And I showed you that image of the nanoparticles around the follicle. And what we found is that when we use nanotechnology to treat breast cancer or ovarian cancer, we have to also take into account the wish of a patient for future fertility. And more specifically, in breast cancer, when we treated during the ovulation, during the peak of the menstrual cycle, and we saw more nanoparticles actually accumulating inside the ovaries and the uterus, we saw a long-term effect on the fertility of the mice. Meaning that when we come to treat, we may actually want to treat at the minimum spot of the menstrual cycle in order to reduce the accumulation of medicines inside the ovaries and then allowing future fertility of the mice in a better manner. It was a lot to get into in 10 minutes. I'll just say this. So one, thank you again for hosting me tonight together with these esteemed colleagues. I'm actually really humbled to be here. And I just want to say, when we come to design new medicines, we need to surely account to gender and sex. Of course, that's extremely important. And I think also when we look forward, it's not only about the gender at any day of the year. Previously, people have spoken about the menstrual cycle, about menopause. And of course, different states in our lives also have to be accounted for when we come to administer a medicine. And I'll just end with this, that when you look up in PubMed, which is probably the biggest and most important accumulation of scientific papers, and you look at nanotechnology and nanomedicine and gender, you actually find less than 0.1% of the publications, meaning that we surely are not doing enough to include gender into our considerations in the development of this increasingly important therapeutic tool. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Avi. I'm sure that your research insights are going to be a real game changer for the way going forward, considering sex and gender in the wide range of nanotechnologies that are going to be available or are currently available for women's health. Thank you so much, and over to you, Michal.